Aloha, I'm Cindy Palos, and this is Talk Story, Maui's longest-running talk show. And one of the nice things about having a talk show is being able to meet and greet and talk with people I really enjoy talking to. And that's what I'm doing today because it's a Hana Ho for the last few years. Barry Nickelsberg, who's with he's the CDO, Chief Development Officer, right? With
Yes.
the Carter Center.
Yes.
The Carter Center is back again, thank God, because I love talking to you. You have a chance to go around the country and talk to different Rotary organizations. You just spoke at the Rotary organization here yesterday, correct?
Yesterday, yes.
And that, what a nice treat. You let people know what is going on in the world with the Carter Center and with Jimmy Carter. And there were so many people who were concerned about Jimmy Carter's welfare. I mean, it was all over the news a while back that he did have that fall. And I guess I want to start with, how is Jimmy Carter doing?
He's doing remarkably well. He truly is an unbelievable human being. He fell 3 times, and then he had a brain bleed all within just a few months. And he is back. He's just almost like it never happened.
Mm-hmm. How old is he now?
He's 95. She's 92. They've been married 72 years.
Amazing.
And for your listeners who wonder what the secret is to a long marriage, President Carter has often said, it's just 2 words. Yes, dear.
They're an amazing couple, and he still is doing his work. And he does so much. I can't believe it. He still teaches Sunday school.
Yes.
And he's doing the Habitat for Humanity.
He did this year with a big black eye because the day before he fell down and had 14 stitches above his left eyebrow.
But what a lot of people don't know is what the Carter Center is really doing. And that's part of what your job is. What a wonderful job to go around and tell people what is being done with the Carter Center that is so impressive, that helps so many people.
Thank you.
I mean, you do a great job there. And how large is the Carter Center?
There are 225 staff in the headquarters in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And then we hire and train nationals for just about every country we're in. So it's hard to say. That number moves around so much, but I can tell you 225 in Atlanta.
And you said you just have a brand new CEO beginning in June, right?
June 15th, yes. We had a CEO for 25 years, and then he retired, and it took about a year to find the next CEO. And she had come in and she said, look, I'm going to give you 5 years, but then I want to retire. And they said, okay. And so she was just sticking with her original plan, and there was a worldwide search, and the Board of Trustees selected a woman named Paige Alexander, and she was with the U.S. Agency for International Development for 15 years and worked on the Open Society Foundation in Prague, and her resume is unbelievable. So we're very excited to see her coming in.
What would you say the goal of the Carter Center is?
Oh, well, I think there are 3. I think one of them is to support any sort of peace effort, whether it's within a country or between 2 countries or among 3 countries. We got heavily involved in Colombia after a 52-year war with the FARC rebels. It was the Carter Center that brokered the peace agreement. And then it was the Carter Center who had to stay on the ground and make sure that peace agreement was honored. And right now it's not being honored, and that's why we're hearing about Colombia and FARC again. We want to make sure that elections are free and fair whenever possible. This week, I believe right now, today or starting tomorrow, there's an election in Guyana. And we will We are there. Our team is on the ground, and we'll be monitoring to make sure it's free and fair. And that will be our 111th election that we've monitored somewhere in the world since we started in 1982.
Will you be able to monitor the coming elections?
We cannot monitor an election in the United States
Ouch. Okay.
for two reasons, just two. They're tiny, hardly worth mentioning, but the United States does not follow international election guidelines.
I didn't know that.
It doesn't. We have to have one voting system from coast to coast. That doesn't exist.
Huh.
There are counties in the United States that don't even have the same voting system from polling place to polling place. So that's the first one. The second one is that both major parties, in this case the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, would have their leaders come to us and say, we would like you to be an election observer. I don't know that either political party is ready for that sort of observation.
Do you feel sometimes, and does the organization, the center, feel that maybe now Jimmy Carter is able to do more than he did when he was president?
Jimmy Carter's presidency was extraordinary. The thing that bothers me the most is when I meet people who say, best ex-president ever. Because what it says is he wasn't a very good president, but he was a great ex-president. And I take issue with that. Some of your listeners may not know that when President Carter came into office, a total of 6 women had ever, in the history of the U.S., been appointed to the federal bench. When he left 4 years later, he had appointed 43 women to the federal bench. He set aside more land for public use than all of his predecessors combined, more acreage than is in the state of California.
Wow, I did not know that.
He created 5 national parks.
Wow.
And the list goes on and on and on. We were importing 8 million barrels of oil a day when he came into office, and when he left, we were importing 4 million barrels a day. The last budget he sent to the Congress was a balanced budget. Today, we can't even imagine what a balanced budget would look like.
Yeah.
But he was able to do that. And his presidency was extraordinary. For those who are not sure, it's easy enough to Google nowadays and find out what his accomplishments were. I know you want to talk more about the Carter Center today than you do about President Carter himself. But, I'm just happy to let your listeners know that President and Mrs. Carter are doing well. And they're getting around, and you would never know that they were 95 and 92.
It's mind-blowing. It's such an inspiration. We need inspiration. And I know we need to be inspired to the point where we realize that there are people doing things that we aren't aware of. And you are reaching out to the world and doing a lot of work in a country we don't always hear that much about in America, and that's Africa. You've been doing an amazing job with building latrines, and I talked to you this on your other visits, and it opened my eyes. I didn't know how important it was to have the ability for women to go to the bathroom, which they couldn't do. And I never knew about the rules, and they were not even able to go to the bathroom during the daytime, right?
Right, that's exactly right, because a man might see them. In their culture, that's just can't be done. And there are no bushes or trees or hills or any place for a woman to hide. So she had to wait until dark. And it resulted in a lot of urinary tract infections and bowel obstructions, many of which killed those women, because there's not a surgeon around to correct the bowel obstruction, and there weren't antibiotics around to take care of the UTI. And we have now built 8 million latrines.
8 million. Oh my gosh.
President Carter jokingly refers to himself as the potty man of Ethiopia. But we've really changed Ethiopia for the better. That's just one example. Another is that that country no longer deals with guinea worm at all. It was
Now, a lot of people are not aware of this, and I've learned only about guinea worm because of you. But this is a thing we don't know about. But tell us a little bit about what the guinea worm is and the reason it causes such huge problems.
it's a parasite that lives in water. And when you drink the water, you ingest the parasite. It takes about 12 months for the parasite to grow to 3 feet in length.
Wow.
It then forms a blister anywhere it wants on your body and crawls out over about a 2-month period. If you should try to pull it out and it breaks, it goes back in, grows to 3 feet again, and either comes out of that blister or forms another one. But you can only coax it so much, and it's extremely painful. And when you have a worm emerging from your body, if you go in the water to cool off, the minute it hits the water, that worm releases its eggs and the process starts all over again. So in 1986, there were 3.5 million cases of this in 22 countries throughout Africa. Today, well, as of December 31st, 2019, there were 52 cases left on the face of the earth.
That's amazing work. And that's intensive on-the-ground work that you're doing.
Very intensive, very much on the ground. And this is a disease that's been around since biblical times. They called it the fiery serpent. It's exactly how people had to treat it back then. And they just accepted it as a way of life. They had no idea how they got it, but Ethiopia no longer has guinea worm disease. It really has very little trachoma or river blindness or lymphatic filariasis, schistosomiasis. Those are all other diseases, and I know there's a lot of iasis going around in there. But what I'd like your listeners to know is that we take our role very seriously for trying to eradicate diseases that otherwise would just go on unabated. And one of our founding principles is that we only do what other people don't. So if anyone else was trying to eradicate any of those diseases, we would never have gotten involved. Mm-hmm. And that's just how that's how our health program works. Mm-hmm. Our peace program, as I mentioned, we have election monitoring, and we have conflict resolution program, that was the program that negotiated the peace between FARC and the government of Colombia. But then again, there was the government of Colombia and the government of Venezuela that had closed their borders, rattling their swords. Those days are over. We had stepped in and helped them come to a resolution. There was almost a war between Colombia and Ecuador. Again, we stepped in. We've done that in Sudan. We've done that in any number of countries throughout the world. And we have a significant presence in the mental health community as well. And that really is Mrs. Carter's focus and has been since 1966, when President Carter first ran for governor of the state of Georgia. And so people ask, well, I get this question a lot. What has she done? Because people have not heard about the Carter Center. They have not heard about the mental health program. But if I ask a room full of highly educated people, what is Jimmy Carter doing? They would say he builds houses for Habitat, mm-hmm. which he does 1 week a year. Mm. And for the rest of the year, he's working with the Carter Center. Mm-hmm. But he has total control of the Carter Center in terms of visibility, and he does not like visibility. All he wants is to get the job done. Mm. The job is to eradicate these diseases, not to pat ourselves on the back. Mm-hmm. So whether we get any publicity at all, consequently, there are about 6 of us on staff who run around the world on a very regular basis, letting people know, whether it's Rotary clubs, radio shows, or one-on-one visits, just to say, we're here, we're out here. If you would like more information, cartercenter.org will tell you a world about the Carter Center's work.
Now, some of the work you do in some of these countries, what we call peacekeeping, can be dangerous. I mean, if there was a State Department, you'd have the resources of military and backup and people to support people going in there in very dangerous situations. You, as an organization that's private, I don't believe you have the people to support that you would expect if it was a military operation, these people going in for peacekeeping. So how do you protect your people in these dangerous countries?
Well, I never intentionally put anyone in harm's way, which is why we only work in the southern part of Nigeria, and we're doing so very well. But the northern part is really under the control of Boko Haram. Mm-hmm. And until that is neutralized, we can't go there. Mm-hmm. But in a government, I'll use Mali as a perfect example in Western Africa. Mali was in the midst of a civil war. They did ask us to step in. We did. And a peace was negotiated. Then they asked us to stay on the ground to make sure that both sides lived up to the agreement. And we were able to do that. And we have a man on the ground there right now. And he is not in need of protection, according to him or the government or the rebels or anybody else. They all know who he is. They all respect him. They really do want the peace process to work. Mm. So even in a country like Mali, which at one time was a very dangerous place, in that particular instance right now today, because of the mutual respect, I think my colleague John is not in harm's way.
I was just going to say that word respect, because when you have someone trying to do good that is respected by both sides, it changes the whole tone of the way you do your work versus thinking this person could be on one side or the other, that there's money involved, that there's... When you bring in all those other factors, it actually can stand in the way of the work you want to get done.
Absolutely. And we don't necessarily make friends wherever we go. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, one of the most mineral-rich countries on earth, they have significant mining operations. And they have regularly employed, I hate that word because they're really not, children, sometimes as young as 8 or 9 years old. They send them down in the mines. If they happen to get hurt, they happen to get killed, you just send another one down. Nobody knew what was going on. Well, when we found out about this, we shined a very bright international light on that. And the government has not been happy about that ever since.
Do you do that by press releases, by stories, by documentaries? How do you get the word out about something you think needs a light shined on it?
All of the above. Mm-hmm. Yes, press releases and press conferences and however we can. We've been successful in that regard, but there's been an Ebola outbreak in the DRC. Now, when the Ebola outbreak several years ago happened in Liberia, the Minister of Health called us and said, "You were here to eradicate guinea worm. Can you put your healthcare delivery system back together?"
Oh, my gosh.
And we said, "Yes, we can." He said, "Please come back. Help us with this." And so we did. We were back on the ground within a week. We called 7,000 chieftains together. We explained to them, this is Ebola. This is how you catch it. This is how you don't catch it. Mm-hmm. Now go home and put these things to work. And your listeners may or may not remember that it was 100 deaths the first week, 200 deaths. We were up to about 10,000 people who had died in Ethiopia alone from this horrific disease. And then it just stopped. Mm-hmm. Like overnight, it just stopped because we figured out how to make it stop. Mm-hmm. And we could do the same thing in Sierra Leone. We could do the same thing in the DRC. And we hope that the government will rise above its it's concern for our interest in their mining operations. But so far they've not allowed us in, so we can't just go where we're not welcomed.
You know, it's so amazing how you can get an overview of the world, and this has been always one of my concerns, is that we in America sometimes do not get a worldview. Americans can be nationalistic sometimes. America people can sometimes not have the news service that tells you about what's going on with the world, and we seem to always be concerned with what's happening in America first. So we don't hear about some of these things in the world, and therefore our concern sometimes doesn't extend to some of these situations in the world. I've always truthfully felt the BBC does a better job than some of the news services we have here. Of course, they have a lot of people and a lot of money, and they've been doing it a long time as well. But you have to work within that worldview realm. And do you ever find it difficult when you come and you're trying to tell your story here in America, and you have to basically explain what's going on to people that haven't heard some of the things you're talking about?
We accept the fact that most people had never heard of guinea worm until we mentioned it, that they've never heard of any of the other diseases until we've mentioned that they have no idea the scope of it, because those things are not here in the United States. I want to speak to you from a religious standpoint for just a moment. Maimonides wrote that there were 8 levels of philanthropy. And to just sum it up and simplify it, the first level is, I know you, you know me. I ask you for money, you give me money, I give you something back in exchange. The 8th level, I don't have a clue who you are, and I never will. And you don't have any idea in the world who I am, and I get nothing back for it. That's the Carter Center. The people who do support us are supporting us because they want the world to be a better place. We were front and center on making sure that the war in Darfur, the genocide in Darfur, came to an end. And we don't blow our own horn. We allowed the government of Sudan to say, this has ended, and they can take full credit, because the goal has always been to get the work done, not to pat ourselves on the back. And that's just how the Carter Center works, and I believe it always will. I think that's sort of very humble, founding
Would you
principle.
call that humanitarianism?
Yes, it's very humanitarian. I think building latrines so women don't die of urinary tract infections is a very humanitarian act. I think that you would be hard-pressed to find anything that the Carter Center does that isn't a humanitarian act. I asked President Carter once what he was proudest of during his 4 years in office. And I was sure he was going to have on his list that the peace treaty in the Middle East. It's been the only peace treaty ever signed in the Middle East. So it's between the Israelis and the Egyptians. It's 40 years old. It continues to this day, even with both sides, with so many different leaders coming and going. But that peace treaty has held. That's what I thought he would be talking about. He thought for a moment and he said, we told the truth, we obeyed the law, we defended human rights. That was what was most important to that man. Yeah, he and Warren Christopher, his Secretary of State, negotiated the release of the 52 hostages in Tehran. But the Ayatollah Khomeini hated Jimmy Carter, so he wouldn't let them go until Ronald Reagan was sworn in. But the moment he was sworn in, plane with 52 Americans took off. And most Americans to this day believe that Ronald Reagan freed the hostages on the day he was inaugurated. And the word was, Carter couldn't do this in 444 days. And Ronald Reagan did it before he ever finished his inaugural address. Reagan never corrected the record, which always sort of surprised and saddened me. But neither did Jimmy Carter. And so, having had the opportunity, I asked President Carter, why didn't you correct the record? He looked right at me and asked, what was the goal? I said, the goal was to get them out alive. He said, and we achieved that goal. Yes. That's your answer. Doesn't matter who takes the credit. It only matters that the goal is achieved.
Well, the power of goodwill is a very, very, very amazing tool to use, and there's a lot of goodwill going on here. And I do want to bring it around again to the fact that you're able to do some of the talks you do around the world through the Rotary Club. And that's been a wonderful tool that you can use because there's people there that are working with goodwill and trying to help as well.
Absolutely. I've been a Rotarian for 33 years, so I'm well aware.
Mm-hmm. And you've been able to travel to all places around the country and outside the country, like you say, every few years. And what is the human common thread that you do find? I find one-on-one is very different than trying to deal with emails or, any kind of social media and stuff. There's power you can do that way. You can reach a lot of people. But you still work one-on-one with people, don't you?
Most of my work is one-on-one. And it gives people a chance to express their concerns, their doubts, whether it has anything to do with President Carter or not. And some people are very eager to talk about whatever happens to be on their mind. I meet people all the time who tell me Carter was a terrible president. And I have the opportunity to ask them questions like I had posed earlier. And what I hear back is, I didn't know that, I didn't know that, I didn't know that. And it gives them an opportunity to reevaluate. I don't know how much time we have left, but I want a quick story.
About 4 minutes.
Okay. In 2006, President Carter wrote a book called Palestine, Peace, Not Apartheid. And the Jewish community went up in arms. And they said, you can't use the word apartheid and talk about Israel, or you just can't do it. And people hadn't read the book, and people hadn't. Anyway, there was quite an uproar. And I've been working with that uproar quite a lot, meeting with Jewish folks one-on-one. And when they get around to calling me an anti-Semite, I explain to them it's a hard sell because I'm not only president of my synagogue, I'm also the cantor at my synagogue. And so I don't think I'm an anti-Semite. But I do believe that Carter did one thing that was very, very smart. People said it's a terrible book, it's a horrible book. People had not read the book. In 2009, another of Carter's 32 books that he's written is called We Can Have Peace in the Holy Land. And people said, well, never heard of that. Well, it's the same book under a different title. And why would he do that? To prove that it was never the book. Mm-hmm. It was only the title. So why would a man that smart choose a word like apartheid? He certainly had all kinds of good advice telling him not to do that, because the peace treaty had come to a complete halt. There were no talks in 2006, and he thought, if I can get people talking, maybe they can get back to the negotiating table. They did that year. Whether or not the book was responsible for it, we will never know. Mm. But President Carter has regularly asked if there was one thing he has not yet accomplished and he would like to, and it's always the same answer: peace in the Middle East.
It's a dream. It's a dream that's been going on for a long time. And, I get very encouraged, and I really think our country needs encouragement. There's a lot of people that don't think about all the good stuff that's going on with good people that are out there doing work. And obviously you talk so beautifully in behalf of President Jimmy Carter, but a lot of people don't realize all this good work is being done. And there's people out there in the field carrying on that work, as you are, and many, many others out there. And it gives me hope, and I hope it gives other people hope to remember the positive things that may be going on that we may not even hear about, the good things that are happening in the world. But it's good to remember there are people out there like you and President Carter and the people at the Carter Center doing good work. And I guess the best thing to do is have people go to Carter Center. Is it cartercenter.org?
Yes, exactly.
cartercenter.org. They can give if they want to give. They can read. They can see if maybe there's some way they know someone that would be a good match to help out in some way. But I hope that it gives them some encouragement and to give that feeling of positive energy that we need in this country, that there are people doing good things and there's a lot of work being done in the world, even if you don't know it, to make this world a better place.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, it's always a treat to see you.
Thank you. The treat's mine.
I hope we can get back together again, and who knows where or when, and talk some more about the good things that are being done in the world. And I thank you, and please thank President Carter for all the good work and all the people there we don't get to see doing the good work in the field for the world.
I will make sure that's passed along. Thank you.
Thank you.